1:19 a.m., March 8, 2014, Malaysia Airlines flight MH370, en route to Beijing, suddenly disappeared from radar screens, opening one of the greatest aviation mysteries in human history. A giant plane carrying 239 people disappearing in midair in an era when satellite surveillance covered the globe seemed unthinkable. Today, a full decade later, the final mysteries of this ill-fated flight have finally been cleared up. A series of shocking evidences were published, from the top radar evasion techniques to the co-pilot's final distress call, all revealing a horrifying truth. The dead spot between Vietnam and Malaysia airspace became the fateful place where MH370 lost its way and disappeared from the world. The people behind this tragedy have finally been revealed, and now, we have the answer to all the mysteries. On March 7, 2014, at Kuala Lumpur International Airport, flight MH370 was preparing for takeoff on a peaceful night. The Boeing 777-200ER, one of the safest aircraft in the world, stood tall on the runway, ready for the 5-hour, 34-minute journey to Beijing. Two powerful Rolls-Royce Trent 892 engines roared, preparing to lift the giant machine with nearly 50 tons of fuel and cargo into the sky. 227 passengers from 14 countries were seated, most of them Chinese citizens, eager to return home. Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah, 53, a veteran pilot with more than 18,000 flight hours, held the fate of the entire flight in his hands. Next to him was co-pilot Farik Abdul Hamid, 27, a promising young pilot, who was on his final training flight with the Boeing 777. At 0:41, MH370 was ordered to take off from runway 32R. Taking off into the starry night sky of Malaysia, the final signal from the air traffic control tower rang out. Malaysia 370, contact Ho Chi Minh, frequency 120.9. Good night. The words "good night" Malaysia 370 inches became the last farewell the world heard from the cockpit of MH370. 3 minutes later, as the plane passed the IGARI reference point, the border between Malaysia and Vietnam, it suddenly disappeared from the radar screen. Without a distress signal, without an explanation. In just a split second, the entire giant plane seemed to be swallowed up in darkness. At the Vietnam Air Traffic Control Center, the staff on duty were confused when they received no response from MH370 despite trying to contact it continuously. At the same time, at a secret military radar station, a shadow suddenly appeared, turning 180 degrees to the southwest, flying straight towards the Strait of Malacca. The autopilot was turned off, the plane's trajectory was manually intervened. As if someone was directly controlling it. In the passenger cabin, 227 people were completely unaware that they had deviated from the planned route, drifting into the unknown. On the ground, no one realized that MH370 had disappeared, and no one expected that it was making an unprecedented journey in aviation history. In the darkness, a terrifying conspiracy was gradually revealed, opening up a series of haunting events that the whole world would never forget. Knowing that this was a period of time when both Vietnamese and Malaysian ground stations were slacking off, or dead airspace, while Malaysia thought it had fulfilled its duty, Vietnam simply handled some other flights and waited for a communication signal from MH370. It was not until 17 minutes after MH370 disappeared that Vietnam realized and contacted Malaysia again. The captain of another plane tried to contact the MH370 crew, using the International Air Distress Frequency to relay a request to Vietnamese air traffic control, but all he got was a few faint static sounds and an eerie silence. Where did MH370 go? The plane's transponder was turned off, but Malaysia's military radar, which does not rely on conventional transponders, was able to pick up MH370's signal for more than an hour. According to the information provided, immediately after the left turn, the aircraft continued to move southwest over the Malaysian peninsula. This simultaneously allowed it to move between the Tai Ades and the M765 air route, avoiding all oncoming traffic. It should be noted that the ADIZ here is an Air Defense Identification Zone, which is administered by the Thai military. It can be concluded that the pilot was extremely familiar with the airspace. He was trying to get the plane out of sight of any ATC. This argument was further corroborated when it passed over the Malaysian island of Penang. According to information revealed on April 12, 2014 by anonymous investigators published in the New York Times, co-pilot Farik Abdul Hamid attempted to make desperate distress calls to the ground. MH370 was flying low enough for a cell tower in Butterworth, Penang to pick up the pilot's phone signal. However, these signals were extremely weak and quickly disappeared. It is clear that on the plane, passengers and crew were asked to turn off their phones during their journey. So if anyone tries to make a call, something bad is definitely going on. And if you're still skeptical, pay attention to another type of signal that's actually more reliable than a call from the co-pilot, SATCOM. Like many other aircraft, the Boeing 777 is equipped with a satellite communication device called SATCOM, which receives and sends signals from the ground, providing detailed logs and all flight data. This SATCOM system is linked to the Inmarsat network, a British telecommunications company that provides global mobile services via 3 geostationary satellites. The Boeing 777-200ER will connect to SATCOM in the ground via an SDU equipped on the plane. But at 2:03, when the Malaysian side tried to contact the plane using a satellite message, it did not respond. Australian investigators said that it was likely that the plane had lost power. If a pilot wants to do something shady or there are hijackers in the cockpit, they will try to cut off the power by pressing the bus tie switch and the battery control switch on the cockpit. In this way, the plane will lose almost all of its power, including the transmission system. In this case, the engines can still work normally because they are provided with a separate power source. A small note is that when the power is lost, the plane will try to restart the APU backup power source. So the operator will now turn on the APU switch, then turn it off to prevent the auto start from happening. It can be seen that the hijacker is indeed extremely smart and has extensive experience with the systems on the plane. Turning off the APU was not too scary for him, because when the plane no longer had any power, a ram gas turbine under the fuselage, which generated power by rotating in the wind, would provide a small amount of electricity to the navigation devices and some other important systems. At that time, the plane had turned into a ghostly machine silently rushing into the night. So, where were the other passengers and crew members? Why did they not react? The answer is this: the hijacker took advantage of the time when the passengers were resting, reducing the pressure of the plane to the lowest level to easily control them. At an altitude of more than 10,000 meters, when the oxygen content dropped to the minimum, the passengers would quickly fall into a state of losing consciousness and becoming unconscious. Although the oxygen masks were lowered, they could only maintain the passengers breathing for 22 minutes. The oxygen tanks only lasted for 44 minutes, while the oxygen tanks in the cockpit lasted for 27 hours. Having successfully controlled more than 200 people, the mastermind in the cockpit now began to turn the plane northwest, through the Strait of Malacca. After passing south of Mekar at 2:22, all traces of the flight had completely disappeared from any type of radar. From here, the hijacker would deceive investigators into thinking the plane might crash in the Bay of Bengal or the Andaman Sea, when his real intention was to send the plane into the Indian Ocean, one of the 2 deepest oceans in the world. But the hijacker himself could not have imagined that he would be exposed by the satellite positioning system on the plane. At 2:25, the SATCOM satellite system suddenly returned to normal operation. The satellite company said that they had determined the flight direction of the Boeing 777-200ER by measuring the Doppler effect of ping signals emitted from the plane. The mysterious sounds believed to be signals from MH370 have made the world constantly question the true fate of this fateful flight. And after determining that the plane crashed into the Indian Ocean, A large-scale and most expensive search campaign in aviation history was deployed with the participation of the Australian Maritime Safety Authority, the Malaysian Navy, Indonesia, the U.S. Air Force and many other countries, but all in return was a series of unanswered questions. On July 29, 2015, a shocking discovery was made when a piece of plane debris washed up on the shore of La Réunion Island, a small island in the Indian Ocean, 700 kilometers east of Madagascar, bearing traces of barnacles clinging to its surface, as if it had been drifting at sea for months. The intact serial number on the debris quickly allowed investigators to confirm that it was a flaperon from the ill-fated Boeing 777, opening up new hopes but also raising countless questions about the final journey of MH370. A series of other pieces of debris were also found drifting on beaches in South Africa, Madagascar, and Mozambique, with a total of 41 pieces, as undeniable evidence that MH370 had indeed crashed in the southern Indian Ocean. But the biggest mystery remains unsolved. Who was behind this tragedy? If it were a terrorist organization, they would not hesitate to claim responsibility and make a statement threatening global security, but absolutely no statement has been made, making all hypotheses even more obscure. If MH370 had a technical problem, it could not have flown that far, and if it was sucked into another dimension or swallowed by a black hole. Those are just far-fetched hypotheses without any scientific evidence. From the moment the plane went missing, many pilots, former pilots, aviation experts, and even the Australian Prime Minister all leaned towards a shocking hypothesis. Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah was the mastermind behind this mysterious disappearance. The family of the MH370 captain. The hidden corner of the tragedy. Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah, who piloted the ill-fated MH370 flight, was a veteran pilot for Malaysia Airlines with more than 30 years of flying experience. He was considered by his colleagues to be a highly skilled, dedicated professional, and always maintained a professional attitude at work. However, after the disappearance of MH370, his personal life, especially his family, became a controversial topic, with many theories surrounding the possibility that he had actively piloted the plane to the end of the Indian Ocean. Information from the investigations showed that, before the time of the tragedy, Zahari's family was facing many serious problems. Some unofficial reports said that his wife, Faiza Khanum Mustafa Khan, had left home with their children due to marital problems. The isolation in the family made Zahari become pensive and showed signs of psychological instability. This was further reinforced when the police discovered in his home a cockpit simulator with a similar flight path to MH370, going into the Indian Ocean and ending up running out of fuel. Although Captain Zahari's family and friends have defended him, insisting that he had no reason to commit mass suicide, the findings of the investigation raise many difficult questions. If he was indeed depressed or had psychological problems due to stress in his family, could that have been a factor in his desperate act? Or was it all a coincidence and the disappearance remains an unexplained mystery? Zahari's family has faced intense scrutiny from the media and society, especially as the theory of a hijacking by the captain himself has gained increasing attention. His wife and children have remained silent in public, but according to many sources, they have been deeply traumatized by the disappearance. In any case, Captain Zahari's family is one of the indirect victims of the MH370 tragedy. If the plane's black boxes are found, they could provide a clearer explanation, freeing his family from more than a decade of doubt. The family of co-pilot Fariq Abdul Hamid, who flew MH370, have been left feeling extremely difficult and heartbroken since the plane disappeared on March 8, 2014. The disappearance of MH370 has not only been a heartbreaking event for the families of the passengers and crew, but has also been a tragedy that has lasted for years for the loved ones of those involved, including the co-pilot's family. Fariq Abdul Hamid, who was on the flight, is widely suspected of having played a role in the disappearance. However, it is important to remember that, to date, there has been no concrete evidence to prove that he was actively involved in the incident. The family of co-pilot Farik has faced rumors and pressure from the public. But they have also suffered a deep loss when they could not receive clear answers about why the plane went missing. Throughout the investigation, the family has called for justice and asked for clear information about what really happened. They have attended meetings, spoken to the authorities, and have been subjected to many unofficial guesses and speculations, which have greatly affected their psychology and lives. This has made the family feel even more lost and helpless in finding the truth. Farik's family still live in limbo, with the faint hope that they will one day receive answers. Even as the disappearance of MH370 continues to be one of the greatest mysteries in aviation history. One incontrovertible piece of evidence for this theory is that shortly after MH370 disappeared, investigators found a sophisticated Microsoft flight simulator in the captain's home, with data indicating that someone had used it to practice flying a route almost identical to MH370's, before running out of fuel in the middle of the Indian Ocean. The Australian Transport Safety Bureau, ATSB, announced that 6 weeks before the plane disappeared, the simulator user had followed this exact route, from the Strait of Malacca, looping south, and then plunging into the ocean, as if preparing for a plan with no return. If this is true, this would not be the first case of a pilot deliberately crashing a plane to commit suicide, because in 2015, on Germanwings Flight 4U9525, co-pilot Andreas Lubitz locked the captain out of the cockpit and crashed the plane into the Alps, killing all passengers and crew. The hijacker behind MH370 certainly had extremely extensive aviation knowledge, because apart from the captain, no one else in the cockpit had the skills to carry out such a long and complicated journey without being detected. It is very possible that the captain asked the co-pilot to leave the cockpit to get a drink, then locked the door and carried out his plan, leaving the co-pilot unable to return and having to desperately send the last distress signals to the ground. If MH370 was indeed hijacked, then the perpetrator must have been a highly trained person, a master of aviation technology, or some force that intervened remotely to control the plane in a way that no one could imagine. There are even theories that the CIA used a remote control system to control the flight of MH370, but only those involved can answer what the real purpose was. The Netflix documentary, MH370, The Plane That Disappeared, has raised countless theories, but completely avoided the idea that the captain might have deliberately used the plane to commit suicide, and even accused Vietnam of not cooperating in the search, despite the fact that Vietnam was one of the first countries to launch a large-scale search. Ultimately, regardless of who was behind it, and whatever conspiracy was carried out, one thing is certain: MH370 was deliberately cut off from all contact with the ground before it plunged into the ocean. And this is the theory that most aviation and scientific experts agree with. No country would spend hundreds of millions of dollars searching for something that has no basis, unless they already knew part of the truth and were just waiting for the right moment to announce it. After nearly a decade of mystery and frustration, a new ray of light suddenly appeared in August 2023, when aerospace engineer Richard Godfrey, a former NASA and Boeing expert, announced that he and his team had used WSPR technology to track down the last traces of MH370. The technology works by monitoring global radio interference, allowing them to pinpoint the exact points where the plane might have gone, and after 4 years of analysis, they found 130 interference signals that matched the presumed final route of MH370. The data indicated that the plane ended its journey at a point just outside the 7th arc of the previous search area, at a depth of 4,000 meters below the surface, 1,560 kilometers west of Perth, Australia. To test the theory, Godfrey organized a test flight, recreating the hypothetical route of MH370 at different speeds and altitudes, and when he analyzed the data from WSPR, he realized that the actual and hypothetical crash sites were only 30 kilometers apart. When the news that Malaysia had restarted the search for MH370 was announced, the world was once again in shock. The numbers, the data, the theories are once again being stirred up. But this time, something has changed. Technology has advanced a lot since 11 years ago. Advanced sonar systems, higher resolution satellites, and more sophisticated predictive models are being mobilized. And this time, not only the Malaysian government but also private organizations with huge resources are involved. Analyzing the black box of MH370. The most important clue: the black box of MH370, consisting of two main devices, the flight data recorder, FDR, and the cockpit voice recorder, CVR, is considered the most important clue to deciphering the fate of this mysterious flight. The FDR stores information such as altitude, speed, heading, and the operating status of key systems, while the CVR records all cockpit conversations, including the final exchanges between the crew. If MH370's black box is found, it could help determine exactly what happened in the final minutes before the plane disappeared. However, the biggest challenge is that MH370's crash site is in one of the deepest and most remote areas in the world, the Indian Ocean. Data from the Inmarsat satellite system suggests that the plane may have continued flying for hours after losing contact, further complicating the search. Another important issue is the lifespan of the black box. The underwater locator beacon, ULB, attached to the black box can only emit a signal for about 30 days after contact with water. After this time, the search becomes more difficult. Despite advances in seabed scanning technology, finding a tiny object in the vast ocean remains a huge challenge. Decoding the black box will not only help determine the real cause of the MH370 tragedy, but can also shed light on theories surrounding it, from technical errors, intentional actions, to factors never before known in aviation history. This is the final key to closing one of the greatest mysteries of the 21st century. Ocean Infinity, the company that joined the search for MH370 in 2018, has now announced that it will use AI technology to optimize the search. They believe that with the new technology, the search time will be significantly shortened. But there is a problem. Many areas of the Indian Ocean seabed are still unexplored darkness. The depth can be up to 6,000 meters, where sunlight cannot reach. What lurks below, no one knows for sure. On March 17, 2024, a team of professional divers from Australia received orders to check a new coordinate near the 7th arc. As they descended into the cold water, the mothership's sonar signal suddenly fluctuated sharply. A large object was right at the bottom of the sea. The remote-controlled cameras were activated, and images gradually appeared on the screen in the control room. No one could breathe. It was a giant metal frame, covered in sea sediment. Debris was scattered around, but the most terrifying thing was human remains. In one corner of the wreckage, a skeletal arm was still stuck in the seat frame. The signal was severely distorted. A strange noise rang out from the broadcast speakers. Technicians rushed to check the system. It was not a signal from the mothership. Instead, it was a series of encrypted sounds, seemingly coming from the bottom of the sea. When the signal was decoded, a strange series of numbers appeared. It was not a normal coordinate. It was a string of characters referring to a location that had never been mentioned in previous reports. What really happened to MH370? And more importantly, who was sending the signal from the bottom of the sea? The search suddenly became more than just a technical task. It has become a race against time, and a mystery that could change the entire history of aviation. On March 8, 2025, on the 11th anniversary of MH370's disappearance, the Malaysian government announced the resumption of the search, with the participation of Ocean Infinity, an American marine robotics company, pledging to find nothing, not receive a fee. Another company, Deep Vision, has also submitted a new search proposal, hoping to apply advanced technology to track down MH370, just as they discovered Amelia Earhart's missing plane 87 years later. The world can hope that, in the not-too-distant future, the greatest mystery in aviation history will be solved. Don't miss the exciting developments in the next part. Watch the next video on the Phantom Script channel, and don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any new episodes. Rocket fire.